Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here with a video for my favorite things. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing this new stencil as part of the July release. This is called the Big Balloon Stencil, and you can see here it has 5 great size balloons for all of your card designs, and we are going to be making a card with the stencil today. So what I've done is I've just taken a white piece of cardstock and I've cut it down to 4¼ by 5½ inches, and I'm going to add some balloon detail to this panel with the stencil. Now I'm going to be starting off with ink first. I'm going to be using 2 different colors of premium dye ink, and I'm going to add the color through the stencil with an ink blending tool. So I'm just using some repositionable tape to kind of hold everything in place. And then I'm going to start adding some color to my balloon. So I'm using blue raspberry dye ink to do my inking on the first balloon, and I'm just taking some repositionable tape and putting it around the balloon area so that I don't get ink on the cardstock. Now, you're going to see here that I completely forgot to tape the very top part of the cardstock, so when I started to add my ink, I ended up with blue ink at the very top area. And it's not going to matter in the finished card because this panel that I'm actually creating right now is not what gets used for the embossed detail. Once I completely had this finished and I did my inking, I ended up messing up the embossing part, so I had to start over. But for some reason, my camera did not film me re-inking the balloons the second time. So you're getting the first inking of the balloons and the second embossing detail. So I kind of had to put everything together here to show you how the card was created. So it's a good thing though, I'm kind of showing you in this part what you don't want to do, and that's you don't want to forget to completely put tape around your stencil so that you don't get ink where you don't want it. So you can see there I have a piece of blue up top, and then I'm using the Coral Crush ink to do the second balloon, and I'm also going to get ink on the side of this stencil, so I end up with 2 areas that have ink where I don't want it. So for the actual inking, I'm just using the blending tool. I'm using a light hand and just going in a circular motion and kind of blending around that balloon. And you can see you get these awesome balloon images from the stenciling and also that great mess up where I have ink where I don't want it. Now for the embossing part, I'm just taking Limelight ink, this is also dye ink, and I'm putting it onto my craft mat. Now if you have re-inkers, those are even better because you can just kind of squirt the color right onto the craft mat and you have a lot more color to work with quicker than actually putting the stamp pad onto the mat. I didn't have the re-inker in this color though, and I really wanted to use the Limelight, so I just worked with what I had. So you can definitely use the ink pad if you don't have the re-inker. And I'm just using my tool here to kind of blend my white embossing paste into the inked area. And you can see here as I move it around, that ink picks up into that embossing paste and starts to turn it green. Now I did add a couple more swatches of ink onto the mat in a clean area, and then kind of move my embossing paste around into a different part of the mat until I had it completely the green color that I wanted it for the last balloon that I'm going to put on this card. So now, like I said, the original card, this is the original card, and when I got to this embossing part, I completely messed up the balloon. The stencil shifted, and I had to start over. So when you see this part here, now me adding the embossing, this is actually a second batch of embossing paste that I created, and this is the second panel that I had inked the balloons on. But it's still the same idea. I put the stencil onto the cardstock panel. I completely adhered it down with tape from every direction so we wouldn't have to worry about it moving. And then I just used my embossing paste that I had tinted with the Limelight color of ink and completely covered that balloon area. Now one thing I like to do just to kind of kick it up a notch with embossing paste, because it is wet when you first put it on, I like to take a little bit of glitter and kind of sprinkle it over top with my fingertips so that when the embossing paste dries, the glitter dries right in the paste. So you're going to see when the card's finished what an effect it gives to the dried embossing paste. I absolutely love it. So now that I have everything, all the paste in the balloon, I have it nice and filled how I want it, I'm going to very carefully remove the tape from the stencil from 3 of the sides. And once I have 3 sides completely lifted, I can lift the stencil off of the cardstock panel, and that will allow me to remove the last piece of tape on the top area and reveal the balloon that we've created with the embossing paste. So I just absolutely love how this turns out. I love that you can see the Coral Crush and the blue raspberry balloons from underneath. It just makes it look completely realistic and like it's actually floating in front of each other because you can see the balloon detail coming through that embossing paste. And now look at that glitter and sparkle. Now that the embossing paste is dry, I let it sit and dry, and look at the dimension and the glitter that you have in that balloon. I think it is so much fun, and it's just such a great way to add some unexpected detail to a card design by adding the embossing paste through a stencil. So now that I have that all finished, I can adhere this panel to my cardstock, to my card base, and I decided to go with a Limelight card base to match the center balloon, and this is really bright for me. I usually tend to gravitate towards white card bases, but I really wanted to kind of kick it up a notch and go really bright and fun with this, and I love how it turned out, so I was really happy with the card base and the design of the balloons. Now for the sentiment, I wanted to use something that would fit into the bottom left area of the balloon panel. And I really like the sentiment from this new stamp set from this release called Time for the Bubbly, but it was too long to fit into the area. So I am going to take my scissors and cut this apart. So don't panic. You can definitely put them back together if you want to stamp them how they were intended, but this just allows me to kind of manipulate and put the sentiment how I want it without having to worry about masking or getting ink where I don't want it. So I just positioned those one on top of each other onto my grid mat there. I used it to line it up. And then I put my acrylic block onto the stamps to pick them up. And now I'm going to stamp this directly onto that cardstock panel with black licorice dye ink. And you can see how perfectly the sentiment fits into this area now that we kind of layered it rather than trying to use it as one long stamp. So now for the detail on the balloons, I just want to add some strings coming down from the balloons. So I'm just using a black pen and I just am drawing the strings straight down or curly, depending on kind of the direction they have to go to reach the bottom of the card. And then I'm also adding a line across the bottom area of the balloon so it looks like the string is actually tied onto the balloon. And then, so for this one here, I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of a loop. And the pen worked perfectly on the embossing paste. I was a little worried that it wouldn't, kind of write properly on the paste, but it did no problem, so you can't even barely tell that it's different. And then, like I said, I just went ahead and did those strings. Now, I also went back and put a little loop at the top area of each of the strings just to kind of make it look like they were tied to the balloons. And then once I have that done, I can go ahead and add a little bit more detail to finish this card. The balloons, fill up a lot of the space, but I felt like there was still some white space and it could have used a little bit more. So if you know me, you know what that little more is. It's definitely some clear sequins. So I went ahead and put some clear sequins in the top corner area of the panel, and then I also added some down in between the strings of the balloons and the sentiment, and I filled the centers of those sequins with silver stickles to finish them off. And that's going to complete the card for today. So I hope you enjoyed this video sharing how to create textured balloons with stencils, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks for watching.